Hello and welcome to the Al-Attiyah Foundation podcast. Today, we're joined by Abdurrahman Khalidi, General Electric's Chief Technology Officer for Europe, Middle East and Africa at IEA. Abdurrahman, Dr. Abba, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Stephen, for hosting me. It's an honor to be again with you on this channel.
Oh, well, you're very kind. To many of us in the Middle East and Europe, General Electric means big gas turbines for electricity generation. In Europe, I suppose it means more about large offshore wind turbines. For the rest of the world, perhaps aircraft engines. Tell us, first of all, Dr. Abba, the scope of your technologies that will impact the change to non-fossil fuels.
Great. Thank you, Stephen, for starting actually with such a broad question for me. As you are aware, General Electric Company is serving the world through three major infrastructure offerings. Best-in-class aviation gas turbines that are the most advanced fuel-efficient turbines in the world. They're on the majority of the flying airplanes in the field. If you're anywhere in the world, you're most likely traveling on a jet engine manufactured by GE. We also have the energy portfolio, which has been put together formally this year, that spans hydropower, renewable power, which is offshore, onshore, nuclear, grid, gas, which is what I am part of also of, steam services. And lastly, the last infrastructure is healthcare diagnostics portfolio that ranges from actually small handheld ultrasound machines to large MRIs and CT scanners. Now, on the decarbonization side, we believe that both aviation and energy have a major scope to play. As you know, transportation and power, these two are responsible for more than 60% of the global greenhouse gases in the world. And that in reality, there is no net zero realization anywhere in the world, whether US or Europe, without having these two sectors playing a leading role in changing the CO2 footprint. GE gas turbine technology has already the technical path towards zero carbon power, completely zero carbon through either pre-combustion or post-combustion that I will elaborate on perhaps later in this broadcast. Yeah. And in the same token, aviation has the ability to do the same with hydrogen and biofuels.
And is already being tested, of course. And in, I think, in the States, an Airbus. But anyway, let's talk about those GE large electricity generating turbines in the Middle East. And we know there are lots of them. We're always talking about the economics of going green and non-renewables. Can they be made to run fully or partially on hydrogen? And so, if they will be made to run fully or partially on hydrogen, will we need completely new turbines, or will it take just small modifications?
Brilliant question. I think this question is on the minds of many, many people, Stephen. Let me just say, we've been in this region, Middle East, Gulf, since the 40s of the last century. We've been here, we've been enjoying a significant installation capacity here in the region. We're well over 40% of the total installed gas turbine fleet in the Middle East and Gulf. As such, we have to play a significant role in the decarbonization. On the question of hydrogen, I'd like to say that already GE has had a long experience in burning some form of hydrogen in our gas turbines throughout the world. We have over 100 units around the globe which have seen various levels of hydrogen doping up to 95% in some cases, and as low as 5%, with over 8 million hours of operation. Can gas turbines burn hydrogen? The answer is yes. And in some cases, the modifications in terms of how much investment can vary depends on the technology that you want to adapt, whether it's an old technology or new technology, and also on the amount of hydrogen you want to burn. A 5% hydrogen doping is significantly different than 30 or 50 or or 10%. In reality, you don't need to change the whole system. It's only the combustion, the controls, and some of the auxiliaries associated with the power plant. It's not a significant
So it's
surgery,
not
I would
turning
say.
everything. It's not turning everything on its head.
Absolutely not. And some of it can be done with a very little modifications that we can do within 2 weeks.
So, what is the thinking within GE on where the hydrogen will initially come from? Will it be from steam reforming of natural gas, which is currently the cheapest method of production, but it also has a carbon footprint? Or is it electrolysis? Is electrolysis the ultimate solution? And is GE active in developing electrolysis equipment?
You know, this question comes off maybe every day 400 times. Very relevant and very
Well, you should know
important.
the answer then.
And I should know the answer. And let me start by the following. For a gas turbine technology like us, we don't care about the color of hydrogen. We can burn any hydrogen you provide to us. But for the world, it really matters a lot. Currently, with all the space missions that we fly to the moon, 95% of all the hydrogen produced for the industry today, specifically in America and elsewhere, is called gray hydrogen, meaning it comes in from methane or natural gas or even coal, but without any CO2 abatement. All the CO2 is released to the air. So if we're going to be serious about decarbonization, we should first tackle that channel alone by taking that CO2 and sequestering it into what we consider as blue hydrogen would be the first step towards decarbonization. Now, carbon capture and sequestration is an old technology. It's not something new. We should use it, and this should be implemented in many areas where we're producing hydrogen through SMR, as you mentioned. Now, let's move to green hydrogen, which is the ideal in any situation. As you know, green hydrogen relies on water and electrolysis. There is a physics fact here. The water molecule, although it's very abundant, it's a very strong molecule. So you need a lot of energy to pry out the oxygen from the hydrogen. As a result, and this is physics, this is not OEM, it's not GE versus others. You would need to spend a lot of energy and you need to use electrolyzers. Right now, it's an order of magnitude, the price of green hydrogen versus natural gas. But we believe that green hydrogen, through the advancement of the electrolysis technology in the world, within 1 or 2 decades, we might be talking about green hydrogen, blue hydrogen, and even natural gas to be in the same order of magnitude. And when this happens, I believe green hydrogen will be the future
Yes.
for power.
Um, Dr. Albert, let's talk about the Middle East specifically and the domestic use of hydrogen in the Middle East. There is an argument that says producing nations should use alternative fuel sources for domestic energy consumption. And that would, of course, allow natural gas to be released for export. And there is an increasingly big market for that at the moment. Even a small dilution of domestic gas with hydrogen could release significant volumes of natural gas. Is that a viable thing for the future?
You know, Stephen, I know how relevant your question is. It resonates well with what we're all witnessing today on the European front. The security of natural gas and its strategic importance, it cannot be underscored more. Now, I have a house in upstate New York. It's heated by natural gas, and my stove is also supplied by natural gas. If we're gonna be seriously decarbonizing the energy sector, including housing, then this residential power has to be completely electrified. And natural gas should be used for more exports. And same with our cars, we need to electrify our cars. But when we do that, Stephen, people need to understand that you need a lot of electrons. So you need to invest significantly in either large gas power plants or renewable technology whenever needed. Now, sometimes you're curtailed, sometimes you cannot have enough land for that, but in many cases you do. And then you deal with the intermittency issue of, of, of renewables. Hydrogen is the most abundant molecule in the universe. All right, 99% of the universe is hydrogen, but unfortunately, it shows up on Earth as either water or a hydrocarbon. It doesn't show up alone. I wish it does. So replacing natural gas combustion with either green hydrogen or blue hydrogen is definitely right now is going to be more expensive in the short term. In my mind, the world has to be really, I mean, there are a lot of talk about net zero. There is no silver bullet. We need to think in terms of industries that are highly emitting CO2 right now, today, cement, coal, oil, and gas. Until now, we have simple cycle power plants. By making that a combined cycle, just one step that you can do, and you reduce your CO2 content by half. So in my case, in my mind, I know I moved all around the map, but I want to draw a picture that if you're gonna decarbonize, you have to do that at scale. Doing little things here and there is not gonna cut it.
So
We have a huge road ahead of us.
Yeah, it's that's absolutely right. And every answer, every question always comes back to investment as well. And talking about scale, we've seen the GE turbines become bigger and bigger. Does size matter? Is it all about economies of scale with all turbines? And are the largest turbines capable of using some hydrogen as a fuel?
Absolutely. This is true, Stephen. Size matters in both CapEx and OpEx. Let me give you an example. If you go back 40 years ago, the largest gas turbine in the world that debuted at that time was called the GE9E unit. That was in early 1980s. And it exceeded for the first time 100 megawatt. That was considered as a wow at that time. For the first time, we created a gas turbine that can give you 100 megawatt in simple cycle. The simple cycle efficiency of that turbine was around 34%. Today, as we speak, we are installing the fourth generation GE gas turbine, which is 9HA.02. It can produce 571 megawatt. Imagine from 100 to 500 megawatt and at a combined cycle efficiency of 64%. 34% simple cycle to 64% combined cycle. There's a huge reduction in fuel combustion and CO2 emissions when you increase your efficiency by 1%, let alone 50%. A combined cycle, 9HA, the largest that we have, operating at baseload, Stephen, can emit one third of a CO2 of a comparable coal-fired steam power plant. If the world is going to be serious about it, we should start with the large, long chimneys that are there.
Right. Okay. Now, as we all know, Qatar was the pioneer in the transportation of LNG. What about hydrogen? Can hydrogen be easily transported by pipelines or ships, or will hydrogen be limited to the so-called hubs, which, as you know, cluster possible hydrogen using industries together, as is being suggested by some?
Very good question. So one of the toughest actually challenges, not only the production of green hydrogen or blue, which is a little bit expensive given where the prices are, but it's the mobility and transportation. Hydrogen, why? And this is physics. This is not related to technology. Hydrogen is a very light molecule. It's the lightest, actually. And it requires a lot of volume to store with little calorific value. For instance, if I'm going to take a gas turbine power plant and replace all the natural gas with hydrogen, 1-to-1, I would need 3 times more the volume of hydrogen. Why? Because the latent energy or the energy in that molecule is 1/3, a little bit less than 1/3 that of natural gas.
Gosh, you're giving me a very good, Dr. Abba, you're giving me a very good science lesson. Sorry to interrupt, but carry on.
Sure. So I just want people to remember hydrogen, natural gas, hydrogen has 1/3 of the energy. This is physics. All right. When it combusts, it just emits 1/3 of the energy. So if you're in a land base, transportation by pipelines is possible. All right. But you need to take care of a few things. Why? Because related to safety and sealing. Why? Because hydrogen is such a small molecule. At high pressure, it can escape any mechanical seal. All right. And when it escapes, if it is leaked out, if there is a fire, there is an explosion, it's not actually a fire. So in shipping, now let's look at the global now market. In shipping hydrogen overseas, you can do it through three methods. First, you can compress the hydrogen, but that has limited success because you cannot compress it enough. You can liquefy. Now, liquefying hydrogen, aside from natural gas, you have to almost reach 0 Kelvin. So you need to spend a lot of effort and energy to liquefy hydrogen versus natural gas. And finally, which is something that we can talk further about, the world has moved to ammonia as a carrier of hydrogen because it seems as a liquid form at room temperature, this is the best way to move hydrogen overseas.
So you would say that if you're transporting a hydrogen, you could convert it into ammonia or methanol. So that is feasible, you reckon?
Yes, it is feasible, and it is not only feasible, it seems with everything we are hearing around the world, especially in this region, blue hydrogen production is followed by ammonia production. This is blue ammonia, and there is a growing market for that. You take that ammonia and you ship it. Now, the big question mark maybe somebody will ask, can we burn ammonia directly, or should we crack it up back to hydrogen and then we utilize the hydrogen? Now, as a technologist, I'll tell you, if we find a way, we're following that very closely, Steve. Here's why. If we were able to burn ammonia directly, we will be saved 30% of the energy cost in moving from ammonia back to hydrogen. This is significant. Hundreds of millions of dollars per unit, per one gas turbine unit. But is it easy to burn ammonia? No, it is not easy. Ammonia is a nasty liquid, caustic. It is lethargic as a fuel, meaning it's right at the opposite side of hydrogen. Hydrogen we're worried about because it's so reactive. While natural gas in the middle, ammonia is a little bit more lethargic. The flame speed is a little bit low, and so on. But are we following that? Yes, as GE. And hopefully we're looking at this market. We're willing to invest in it, but we're watching how the ammonia market is developing over the next few months. I'll have something more to share on this topic, I would say, in a few months.
Yeah, very interesting. Oh, well, certainly come back to you on that. Let's move from gas to wind for electricity generation. The UK and China, I think, are sort of pretty much in the lead on this at the moment. The largest wind farm, perhaps in the world, the 3 phases of the Dogger Bank wind farm, will be powered by GE offshore wind turbines. In some ways, this now seems almost like a mature technology. So tell us more briefly about the problems involved in installing such offshore capacity.
You know, Steve, although I'm young, I consider myself young, but I'll take myself 20 years ago. I climbed on the top of 1.5 megawatt onshore wind farm in Texas, all the way up to the nacelle. Now think, at that time, that was the largest onshore gas turbine, and we were very proud of that. And this is a technology that we were dealing with. Imagine now the Haliade X offshore wind turbine. It's 15 megawatt in a single turbine. So that one is a midget considered to the 15 megawatt. Now, is it hard to install offshore? Yes, it is. But given the size it has, you would need to do 1 versus 10. It makes a big sense in terms of OPEX and CAPEX. That's why we are very proud about the Haliade. I know we're going to deal with some of the technology issues to make sure that the installation on offshore is easier. But trust me, over the long run, it's a huge payback.
And which are more eco-efficient, the land-based turbines or the offshore turbines?
No, the offshore. Here's why. Typically, when we talk about the capacity factor, the wind blows much more reliably offshore. And as a result, you might reach up
That
to
makes perfect sense.
yes, 50, 60% of the time, these offshore winds are running. Well, if you go onshore, sometimes the wind stops and your capacity factor throughout the year might drop to 25% or even below.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. I mean, I am currently involved in a show about renewables, um, and one of the criticisms about the wind farms were that they weren't that green, they weren't that eco-friendly because of the extensive use of metals. Is that fair?
Look, I think I do appreciate the question and where it's coming from, but I believe it's not a fair criticism.
Okay.
Here's why. The argument can be looked at through the lens of carbon footprint of wind energy or any renewable. This is very, very low. Also, the offshore wind turbines are becoming much, much more powerful. So we need much less of them. Let me, for those who are enthusiasts about this, we talk about the green hydrogen, for instance. But in reality, to produce green hydrogen in the Gulf, for instance, you need to look at the source of fresh water, how you're getting it. The electrolyzers themselves contain a lot of rare earth material that requires mining. So if somebody is gonna go and look at the little detail here and there, he might be able to criticize. But my opinion on this, Stephen, it's very important on the question of CO2. We should always be at scale. We should look at the big volume, not at the small little details. We cannot be concerned. I'll give you one example that might be surprising to you. A typical villa in the Gulf, including Qatar and UAE and everywhere, in 1 month in the summer, we might be emitting over 3 tons of CO2. This is a single individual villa or house in the
God,
Gulf during
that's
the
a
summer.
wake-up call, isn't it?
It is scale. We need to stay
Um,
at scale.
Okay, well, just a couple more questions I have for you, but briefly, if you will. You mentioned in your first answer, you touched on aviation, and there are already planes, experimental flights, certainly using hydrogen. Do you support the possibility of hydrogen-powered aircraft?
Absolutely. It's going to happen, I believe.
Yeah, so
Look,
it's a question of when.
the jet engine is no different than the gas turbine. It can burn hydrogen. It can be modified. And you heard 10 days ago, we announced to the world Airbus CFM, which is a joint venture between
Yes, I
GE
saw
and Safran. We announced we're going to be doing it by 2025. That's only 3 years away.
that.
The
Incredible.
issue is how the public, Stephen, when you come to Doha and we tell you next week, you're going to fly instead of on jet fuel, we're going to have hydrogen tanks. Initially, people will be worried because they associate
I
that
hope
with
they tell me, Dr. Abba, when I land rather than when I take off.
absolutely. But we can. This is an engineering problem, and the human mind has worked hard to solving that. So we will do that. But we're also looking at SAF. We're looking at other stuff to make sure that which is sustainable aviation fuel. This is biofuel. Before the end of the decade, we can run 100% on SAF. We actually Emirates here and UAE is an Ittihad and perhaps soon everywhere else. We could run on 100% sustainable aviation fuel. This is going to come and it's going to be uh, all over the world.
Just a quickie question. Does GE have any involvement with solar power?
Absolutely. We don't produce the commoditized solar panels, but we concentrate on a technology niche, which is the inverters. As you know, solar power produces DC voltage. We don't use DC voltage at home, so we need to have an industrial, reliable inverter. GE provides a lot of those, and we have a more than 9,000 megawatt of installed fleet of these GE inverters all over the world, including some of them are here in the Gulf.
Okay. Well, Dr. Abba, we've touched on so many subjects and you've answered with such articulation, which is brilliant. But I wanted to round up question, if I may. And as a last question, many commentators such as the IEA, talk of hydrogen becoming 20% of the overall world energy mix. Do you think that's a realistic estimate? And if so, by when?
Okay, let's go back to the basics. Brilliant question. The power and transportation sector, as I said, are responsible for over 60% of greenhouse gases in the world today. There is a clear and strong path for the usage of hydrogen in transportation, including fuel cells for car or direct combustion of hydrogen. In the gas turbine world, which includes the jet engine, we have two options only. Either we start at the pre-combustion, so we deal with the fuel itself by introducing hydrogen of any color or ammonia in the future. Or if we don't want to do that, then you're going to have to go to the exhaust and start capturing that CO2. Clearly, the world is not ready for 100% carbon capture. Some countries don't want to do carbon capture, including Europe, Japan, and elsewhere. Some other countries, they have usage for CO2 and they can sequester it and do EOR out of it. You can benefit if you pump it at the right location with depleted oil reserves. You can increase your production. So in my mind, this is doable. Finally, with the geopolitics that we are facing today intensely since last week, think about the countries that can produce their power needs of green hydrogen from their lakes and rivers, rather than depending on foreign import of gas. But are they willing to pay maybe 10 times the price? The question will always be price.
Yeah.
At the end, the world today is too dynamic for me, Stephen, to make any prediction. We will continue to watch these trends actually very closely. We have a big say as GE in shaping the energy transition we have to and the future of energy. And I hope today I was able to convey that message to your respected listeners.
You certainly have, and very successfully too, Abdurrahman. I believe that's all we have time for today, unfortunately. But on behalf of the Al-Attiyah Foundation, I'd like to thank you very much for joining me for this interview and providing the foundation with your excellent insights. And I look forward to hearing from you again in future. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Stephen, and thank you for Al-Attiyah Foundation for hosting me. I'm very proud to be on this.
And watch this space for the next Al-Attiyah podcast in the series. I'm Stephen Cole. Thank you and goodbye.